Welcome to On Thursdays We Thrive podcast. We are licensed therapists here on Long Island, New York.
Our goal is to provide tools and resources to anyone considering starting therapy and to fight the stigma of mental health through a millennial lens.
Even though we are licensed therapists, our podcast is for educational and informational purposes only and is not a replacement for individual psychotherapy.
To book a session with us, head on down to longislandteletherapy.com. So have a seat and get ready to thrive, learn, explore, and grow with us. Welcome back to another episode of On Thursdays We Thrive. I'm Sam.
And I'm Liana.
And today we're going to welcome two psychologists from Koru Mindfulness, which is an evidence-based curriculum that, is designed for teaching mindfulness, meditation, and stress management to juniors and seniors in high school, college students, and adults. So welcome, Barbara and Anthony.
Happy to be here.
Yes. Thank you both for being here. And we also want to mention that Kristen Bruning is a psychiatrist who is also with you guys in Koru, and you've created this awesome program for young adults, which we can't wait to hear more about. But I guess to start, we're just so curious, like, what made you guys so passionate about teaching mindfulness?
Well, I think to sum it up, it's kind of a combination of two things. So Tony and I are both psychologists, as you know, and our work really is informed by the science that's available. And we base our work on what are the best practices and the current research. And there is definitely no scarcity of studies on the benefits of mindfulness. In fact, over the past 40 years, the number of studies has really increased exponentially. So there's a lot of, really strong evidence for the benefit of this work. But in addition, we both have personal experience that really motivates us. We both practice consistently. And it's not so much just a meditation practice, but it really is a way of life.
Yes.
And I think, for both of us, it's been really helpful in navigating some of the difficult spots in life, and also really helping us, to appreciate the joyful moments that there are, which is just as important.
Yes, being more present. And so we're excited to, have you guys really introduce the topic of mindfulness, not just from the basics of what we think it is, but, scientifically what it is and in your guys' experience, and how to exactly incorporate it into our lives and how beneficial it could be for stress and anxiety and maybe in certain specific situations. So, thank you guys. And we're excited to get into that. But before we do, we are asking you guys to tell us what we refer to glow and grow for the week. So glow being something, that has happened to us recently or just went on in general. And grow is something we're working on or trying to improve upon.
Yes. So what are your guys' glows and grows?
I think I can do that one. We just finished a couple of weeks ago. We did a webinar for the joint faculties of Suffolk Community College. And they had contacted us really through another teacher that we all know. And their question was, how do we deal with teachers coming back to campus and not wanting to be here? Because at the time, the pandemic was still, in a very active phase. And just the entire adjustment of coming onto campus, who's vaccinated, who's not, how do we teach? All the things educators would be concerned about. Mm-hmm. So that went really well. And then a couple of weeks ago, we were invited to speak on April 1st. Columbia University runs something called an Awaken Campus Summit.
Cool.
So we're going to do a workshop there, and they wanted that tied into increasing spirituality and increasing spirituality awareness for college students.
Wow.
So,
I love that.
Liana and I love that stuff. That's great.
So that makes us glow.
And what's your amazing. What's your grow?
Oy, as they say. So here's the thing. 5 years ago, you had people who were meditators, but there weren't the large numbers that there are today because there's so much hype around it. You can't get away from it. You go buy your groceries and there's 8 magazines with mindfulness on the cover. So what's happened was we went from a time when we started teaching a few years ago, when there was very little out there, to this explosion of things and free classes online and free webinars online. So what happens is when people have to take a class, we all know you have to look at your calendars, which are very busy. You have to come up with, for the purposes of our class, you have to come up with 4 evening dates for an hour and a half. And so it's really the growing pains are trying to get the message out there that even though we know it's a commitment, we know that you will benefit by this and you will walk away with something really useful to take into your future. So that's a process. That's a slow process, and lots of people doing this now. So we're there. We're getting there.
I can definitely see how that's a grow for sure, because like one, you're battling with like all these, let's say, non-experts or non-people who specialize and like build such a great curriculum like you guys have. And also we know like sometimes people struggle with committing, especially if it's 4 nights, which to us could be like, it's only 4 nights for an hour and a half. But like you said, calendars get really busy and that could overwhelm people. So kind of navigating like, how can we meet people where they're at? How can we like, and that's why we're doing this, like share the importance of mindfulness and what you guys do.
Absolutely.
So when we come back, we're going to get into, like we said before, what mindfulness is and how we can help with our stress and anxiety and how to incorporate it into our lives.
So as we said, that mindfulness has kind of been like a quote unquote buzzword these days. Can you guys share what is mindfulness exactly? Because I think it can be very misconstrued and we think it's like meditation. We think it's just sitting in a room. What is mindfulness?
So I'll give you 2 answers. The practice of mindfulness is ancient. There are many traditions, religious traditions, spiritual traditions that go back thousands of years that incorporated some element of meditation to them. When the people who studied this stuff in the 70s started to see how other parts of the world managed stress and dealt with difficult emotions, they knew that bringing these practices into the country would be very helpful, but they had to remove the spiritual element, particularly in educations like schools. So as it's taught now, the secular definition of mindfulness really has several components to it. But if you think of it as a state of mind, it's a state that you come into which allows you to be present, paying attention to what you're actually doing or wherever you are in space and time, without getting pulled into things that have already passed or more problematic things that are coming down the road. So if you think about, just sitting here right now and we're talking, I might be thinking of, when this podcast is over, I got to run out and do this and that and the other thing. And even though I'm talking to you, my brain's sort of like pulling me in another direction. And similar with past events, something upsetting happened yesterday, you're trying to go about your day and you keep getting pulled into what happened yesterday. So mindfulness is sort of this intentional practice where you hit the stop button on purpose. And you say to yourself, I am going to do something in the form of a practice, a skill, for a few minutes at a time or for a lengthier period of time. But I'm just going to pick an anchor to stabilize me in the present moment. And what we know from research is that simple practice of stopping, focusing, And even though your mind will drift, coming back to your focal point, that has significant changes in the brain, produces a state of wellness and feeling more able to go about what you now need to do with. So that's a very long definition, but it's something that I think people can relate to. We can give technical definitions and textbook definitions, but what real people want to know is, what is this? You know,
Right. Why am I doing this? And
right.
know that it's not easy to pause. And even
No.
when we are pausing, if our phone's buzzing, we're like, okay, back. And especially like you said, if something happened the day before, or we've just been dealing with a certain issue, or we're always go, 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 go. We're never just here. And so it's really, you know, limiting the distractions and working at that. So, you know, aside from what we think can happen from, you know, practicing mindfulness, how can, in your opinion and experience, it help with stress and anxiety, especially if we're experiencing physical symptoms, rapid heart rate, sweating, shaking, you know, dry mouth, anything that can come up for us that could lead us to panic or anxiety?
I think mindfulness helps us to gain clarity. When people feel anxious, it's this overwhelming feeling. You know, there's stuff going on in your body, there's emotions, there's a lot of anxious thoughts, and it just feels overwhelming. And mindfulness helps us to make that shift from being stuck in like that overactive thinking mind and really coming, you know, into our bodies. And with that awareness, we can make different choices and decisions about how to respond to stress. So, like yesterday, I was working with a teen who was suffering from really severe social anxiety. And how this has been so helpful is that with awareness, she was able to really observe how she behaves when she's anxious. You know, that these thoughts that she has of, I'm not good enough, they won't like me anyway, they don't really want to be around me, that's what really fuels the anxiety. But what it does is it triggers the behavior of kind of acting with a bad attitude and kind of a little bit condescending. And what does that do, right? That causes people to maybe be rejecting, and then it just leads to more of those same thoughts of, you know, I'm not good enough, people don't want to be around me. So with this increased awareness and being able to understand how, you know, thoughts and different behaviors and feelings all are related and trigger each other, a lot more progress can be made.
And I'm thinking, because I know people are going to say, and probably because I've experienced it myself, like when you're in this intense feeling of anxiety, when like your heart's breathing, like the negative thoughts are just coming in, like I'm guessing that it really takes practice to, like, even when we're not feeling anxiety, to practice the mindfulness so that when we do feel anxiety, we're kind of better able to use those tools, and then probably just practice on it. Like the first time it's not gonna, or second or third or fourth, it's not gonna really be as helpful, or it'll be really hard, but I guess it just takes practice.
Right.
Yeah.
I think what you're saying, Liana, is exactly why we call it a practice. You know, it's a practice. It's not something that you do once and then you have it like in your tool belt. You know, it's a practice. It's a way of being.
Yes.
And that's why it's so essential to continue with it. Even if you take a 4-week class, the benefits come from consistent practice.
And, you know, I often tell people that even if you're a monk, or, you know, you've been doing this your whole life, you're still never the best at mindfulness. You're always going to be practicing. And just in regards to what Liana had said, what I hear, as I definitely hear that all the time, and before even people attempt to try that, they're thinking, how the heck could breathing help me? So when we go through those things of how it could help, and, I wonder if you could just express, because I try to tell people during our warning signs to start, involving those breathing exercises. But a lot of times they'll say, well, my heart is racing so much. I can't do those timed breaths. So when are the best times to do that for people? And how do we kind of like help that idea of like, I can't do it if I'm in a state, like Liana was saying, the negative thoughts are flowing like crazy, and, or, the physical symptoms are occurring. How can we do that?
I like to, just without getting too biological, so to speak, I like people to understand that the process of practice is the sort of antidote to when your system is revved up. Your autonomic system, your sympathetic nervous system revs up when you're anxious. You experience all those things that you just mentioned. And what meditation does, and what mindfulness really tries so hard to convey, is that you have the capacity to turn on a different part of your nervous system, parasympathetic nervous system, which slows you down. So as your sympathetic nervous system in the face of stress is ramping you up, getting you ready to deal with the stress, and you feel accelerated, hitting that brake and stopping will slow you down. Now, in an actual situation, yes, you may say that, well, I know that, but I still can't get myself to do it in the moment. And that's a question of just, we spoke a minute ago about daily practice. Sometimes people take a class and they'll have some momentous event happen and they'll say, well, it didn't work. Well, of course it didn't work. You learned it 3 days ago. So if you've been anxious your whole life in that situation, this isn't a one-shot, magic bullet.
Yeah.
But it is that continually learning how to regulate your own nervous system that allows it to recognize what you're doing and why you're doing it.
So when should people be practicing this, or when should they, like in the state of that panic or anxiety, when should they start doing this? Right. So they should always be practicing, but in the state of anxiety and stress, is there a particular time in that moment?
I try and ask people to find a place where they can be comfortable, step outside, go to a bathroom, just go someplace where you can just shut the stimulation off for a moment and just breathe quietly. I don't want to give them 100 tasks to do.
Right.
Just breathe quietly, do a few moments of just quiet, deep breathing. I don't have to call it belly breathing. I don't have to call it anything, but you have to short circuit the system. If you don't introduce something else, there's nothing that slows. It eventually will stop on its own, which is true of all panic episodes. But you need to introduce something. It's not going to just stop on its own.
And also what works for one person may be different than what works for another. So we really try to emphasize there's no right way. It really is an individual experience.
You guys mentioned like meditation a little bit, and it sounds like a lot of like meditation. So what would you guys say is the difference? What sets mindfulness apart from meditation?
That is such a great question. It's very confusing to people. And I think we get this question in class all the time. I think the best way to really separate it is that mindfulness is like a state of mind. Meditation is something that we do, that we practice in order to be mindful, in order to, to reach that state of mind. And there are many different types of meditation. All of them have the same aspect of trying to deal with that overactive thinking mind. And to make matters even a little more confusing, one type of meditation is referred to as mindfulness meditation. So I think that's where a lot of the confusion does come
Yeah.
from. But in our classes, we also try to emphasize that there are other ways to practice mindfulness besides meditation. You know, we talk about informally practicing mindfulness throughout your day by choosing whatever your activity, whatever daily activity you might be doing, to practice doing that with awareness. Try to get out of your head and actually experience through your senses. So not thinking about what you're doing, but actually experiencing what you're doing. And sometimes in class, Tony has given a great example of this, which is if you think about watching a sunset, right? No matter how you analyze it and no matter how you think about it and try to explain and describe it to someone, it cannot compare to the experience of actually being there, right? And watching the sunset and sensing it. So that's kind of the practice, you know, of just out of your head into your body.
And I love that you mentioned like you could be doing whatever you want. Like I was at the gym this morning and it kind of came in my head of like, wow, like I do feel mindful because I'm really only focusing on what I'm doing in this moment. Like I'm not even thinking about what I'm doing later today. Is I have to keep my head in what I'm doing right now.
There it is, right? And sometimes in our class, when we have these discussions and people will say, well, I didn't practice at all. And then they go on to say, except, you know, I was sitting with my dog for 30 minutes and I was petting the dog and just so caught up in it. And I wasn't thinking about anything else. And then we say, well, guess what? You were practicing, you know.
I totally tell people to do that too. I'm like, just pet your cat, you know, whatever it is. And they're like, what would that do? I'm like, just do it first. Just try it first. Cause you have to, that's something you have to feel, like you said, an experience for yourself. Is there anyone, you know, you mentioned that what works for one person may not work for all. So is there anyone you would say that doesn't benefit from practicing mindfulness?
I think Liana said something before about individuals who may be in some state of trauma. Because if mindfulness is stopping and trying to be more aware, sometimes if you've had trauma in your history and now a therapist or someone says, well, let's teach you this skill, it might bring you into a space that may re-traumatize you. So we're very sensitive to try as much as you can in teaching this in an online venue, short of asking people, do they have any trauma? That's a group you have to be particularly careful with rather. And Barbara mentioned before, sometimes, you do initial exercises that are common to a lot of these types of classes. And someone will just say, I'm just, belly breathing isn't my thing, so we'll teach them a walking meditation, or we'll teach them something that they don't have to just sit. And, hyperactive people, for example, who are very energetic, ADHD people, a 10-minute breathing meditation might have them standing on the roof ready to jump. Not a good pairing. But if you teach them how to do a walking meditation, so, but other than that, the general public, children, preschoolers on up to senior citizens, and we haven't gotten there yet, but Great Britain now has the use of mindfulness as its first primary healthcare intervention for depression.
Wow.
So if you go to see a practitioner for depression, the government is saying, you better do this first. So that just kind of tells you it is widespread, has lots of applications.
Wow,
So,
we got to get on that.
Yeah, I know, right?
After the war.
We got time.
Right, after the war. So after, I'm on the other thing, after the war. So can you just briefly, just for our listeners, help them understand why, if there's trauma, a little bit of why that wouldn't work for them, mindfulness?
Or wouldn't be beneficial.
Right.
Well, my answer would be because we naturally fall into a state of rumination when we're not doing something goal directed. If I tell you to close your eyes, first of all, we wouldn't even do that necessarily. We might
Mm-hmm.
say, keep your eyes open and pick a focal point in the room. But if somebody closes their eyes and you ask them to focus on their breathing, they're going, thoughts are going to come. That's just what happens to
Yeah.
human beings.
Mhm.
And sometimes what may come for the individuals with trauma is memories of events that you're not really going for in a very simple practice session, but they pop up and they become something that can become an obstacle. So an individual could come back and say, that's very uncomfortable. I don't want to do that
Yeah.
anymore. So,
And I would just add to that also that, with every practice that we start off by reminding people that part of, doing this work is knowing becoming more familiar with yourself, right? And how you personally work.
Mhm.
And so if there's anything with any of the practices that feels uncomfortable, or you need to modify, then that's what you do, right? So um it's really important, I think, for people to understand that this,
Mhm.
they don't have to do anything if it doesn't feel right.
I can,
Yeah.
assume that it's, or, imagine that it's uncomfortable to even feel like I don't want to know what I can and can't do, because it's like getting into my feelings for people who don't like doing that. And like everything, some things are a little bit harder before it gets better.
Mhm.
So, yeah, that was a great point to add. So walking something or active mindfulness would be better for those who don't maybe benefit as much from the sitting and breathing, is what you're mentioning.
well, the fact that there's activity involved,
Mm,
there's more than just that very passive activity of sitting or doing something like a body scan.
yes.
You're just calling on other parts of your body to draw you in and not just your breathing.
Yeah, I can relate to that because I prefer walking as like a meditation. I think that's why one of the reasons I like walking so much. It's because like I can really just like be in the moment, be mindful, and like not be bored or out of my mind. So, but in regards to Koru and I guess the practice that you guys have developed, it's so interesting how you really target college students, young adults, and adults. What made you guys choose to target that population?
Well, Koru was actually the first program that was specifically designed to address that age group. And it has been expanded so that we do use it with adults and with younger than college age. As I think one of you had said, we do also have classes for high school students, and it works out really well. But I think that, when this program was designed, it was because there was clearly such a need for this age group. It's just such a difficult time, as we know, and especially things are only getting more difficult and complex, in our world. But
Mm-hmm.
it's tough for that age group because they have a lot, they're gaining responsibility in so many ways, but they don't always have the tools to manage all of that. And so I think that's what makes it really exciting for us, is that, you know, knowing that it might help young people to learn how to manage stress in a healthier way, is this could be really transformative for them. It's such a critical point in time.
I agree. I mean, lately I feel like I've been seeing more and more young adults coming through the door, like this college age, even
Yes.
pre-college, or like And I'm like, of course it's happening right now, because I mean, that was probably one of the most hardest times for me, because
Oh,
I'm like,
yeah.
should I be a teacher? And I'm like, no, I don't like other people's kids. But then I'm like, should I just like do social work, mental health? Like it was so hard. And
Yes.
so like having something like this for young adults and college kids, teens, and talk about with COVID on top of it. I mean, it's so hard. So it's amazing that you guys were able to recognize that and target your programs for this population.
Yeah.
Well, I think we realized that even though originally it was for college age, that, you know, we all work with younger people,
Mhm.
and we realized like they would benefit so much also. I mean, just seeing the look of relief on their faces when we do, you know, the check-in sort of discussion part of the class, where they realize that, wow, there are other people who have these same struggles as me. You know, I can't believe it. Like they think they're the only ones, and they just feel so supported by that.
It
Yeah.
really is validating. And I love that you guys are starting them, you know, younger, I'll say, because I can't say that mindfulness and meditation was really around or, you know, well known and talked about and practiced when I was in high school and college and things like that. But I can imagine that starting it younger would only have more long-term effects for those. So what are some positive long-term effects of practicing mindfulness?
If you had to look at I guess the broadest outcome that people will tell you who have done this for a while, is that they are less reactive.
Hmm.
So a situation presents itself, an individual, a situation, a friend, family member, something happens. And our tendency, you know, born from our biology, is that some people are much more reactive than others.
Mhm.
And that gets them into a lot of trouble in their relationships and in situations and just living their life. So the broadest outcome I think people would say is they can be in that same situation. They can deal with those same people. The exact same things may happen, but they have this ability to pause before responding.
That's
And
huge, because I'll always talk about like respond rather than react.
Mhm.
So I'm glad you bring that up.
that's the class. We use that phrase all the time.
Yeah. I think a lot of people can relate to that. If, you know,
Yeah.
it's just universal, right?
There's also, you know, if you pulled apart the 1,100 studies that were done
Yeah.
in, I guess it's 2020, there are studies that talk about improved sleep. There are studies that talk about improved blood pressure. There are studies that even talk about lengthening lifespan based on increasing the length of this little biological creature called a telomere. Um, and you look at the pain management and the number of areas that this has just been applied to. So when people say, well, tell us about the research, well, here's the website, you can go look at it, but there's so many applications to it. But those are some of the most common ones. And a general sense, I think, of just, I have something that I can now respond to my life with that I didn't have before.
Right. I know.
Ooh, so like an everlasting tool, like we can just like keep it in our pocket
Yeah.
and use it whenever, as of course with practice, but like kind of pull it out in so many different circumstances.
And always
Like
just
when
getting
you
better
want
at
to say something to your spouse, and you can feel the words coming out of your mouth, and then you pause, and then you retract those words right away.
it. Yes.
A moment of mindfulness just saved your day.
Ooh,
Yes.
you
Like
know, we so
pausing, so important. I've even heard that it can like restructure your brain sometimes to in, you know, different ways. So it seems like there's just endless benefits to this.
It does sound like snake oil, and that's what my wife says all the time. You know, You're selling snake oil. It fixes everything. Well, no, it does. It
Yeah.
doesn't fix everything, but it sure fixes a lot of stuff that real people need help with.
Yeah.
So important.
Again, I think like, the other side of this is that it's not only about like managing when things are rough, that's a big part of it, but
Mhm.
it's also really life-changing when you realize that you have the ability to place your attention or to focus your attention
Mhm.
where you want to, and
Yeah.
that maybe you're really missing out on a lot of the moments of your life that are meaningful. But when you become more mindful, then maybe you're sinking in and savoring those moments a little bit more, so
Mhm.
that, we're not
Wow.
just reducing stress, but we're also just being able to be there for the things in life that, that are important and that matter.
That's what anxiety and stress does to us. Keeps us out of the present moment always.
It's
Or
true. It hijacks our brain, right?
Yeah. So we have listeners in like all different areas of like different fields, like whether it be like teachers, healthcare, the fitness industry, corporate America, keep going, the list goes on and on. So how do we feel like we can bring mindfulness into these different areas? And I know like there's been some sprinkles of mindfulness in schools, but like how else do you feel like we can kind of bring this into these other areas?
Well, it's in many phases of all those areas. Healthcare, for example, Harvard Pilgrim, a major insurer in the Northeast, they have that built into their treatment plans. Now, again, not all these things reach us in the same time and at the same time, the same pace, but healthcare is well aware of these things. And for major companies like that to sponsor it as part of their healthcare plan is significant. Companies like Google,
Mhm.
people go to work for Google for many reasons, but Google teaches every one of their employees how to meditate. Why?
Wow.
Why would a multi-billion company, billion-dollar company, utilize their resources? They could do many things with them, which they do. They put in gyms and healthcare,
Mhm.
if childcare programs. But this is a huge component because if your mind is clear and your employees come to work ready to be innovative and creative, you just made a lot of money.
They won't
So,
That
burn
is
so,
out.
true. Yes.
so healthcare and the business world, executives go on regular weekend retreats, week-long retreats. Why? Because there's a quality in the performance of those executives when they return. They may have more empathy. They may be less reactive themselves. Or they may be better listeners. And within the schools, there are multiple curriculum that have been around for the past 15 years that go from preschool right up through Koru, which is a college level curriculum. So they're out there. And it's a question of where you live in the country
Mhm.
and how connected, people in that particular area may be to the importance of social emotional learning.
Yeah.
So it is out there. I don't know that we need to look at ourselves kind of like as pioneers, but more as people who are nurturing it and bringing it where we can. But it
Right.
is in
Kind of
health. It
spreading
is
the
in
word.
healthcare, education, and the corporate world in a big way.
Yeah. And like I hope that people are able to kind of make themselves aware of the benefits of this to incorporate it in other areas of work too that lack it. Um, Law enforcement, military, things like that. Liana and I did an episode on workplace or certain professions and the way that they view mental health and medication. And we kind of like gathered our own data among people that we know or just speak to. And yeah, we found that certain areas are, lacking it. And but like you said, it depends on where you live too, because certain careers or professions, some said that they, acknowledge it and work toward it. some just said they acknowledge it, but don't follow through. So it's, it's very interesting. And you're so right that if we were able to implement that more, that people would actually be more productive and effective, and they wouldn't burn out. We wouldn't have this, recycling of and turnover of people. So
The NYFD now requires you, if you are going to join their ranks, you take a class in mindfulness. The military, if you're going to be deployed infantry, you take a class in mindfulness.
Wow.
Who has to be more mindful
Mhm.
than some of the folks who are on the ground now
Mhm.
in Russia and Ukraine? You
Yeah.
damn well better be aware of your surroundings, because it could literally mean your life.
Right. We can't really dissociate in that moment.
Exactly.
So I think it would be cool if you guys could actually maybe give us a few brief examples of some specific mindfulness practices that our listeners can take with them.
Yeah.
Would you like us to do a short practice, or would you rather just have us briefly talk about some of the practices we do?
Why don't we practice one that you guys feel would be beneficial to show people, and then we can kind of talk about some others.
Okay, I'll do a brief belly breathing. So wherever you
We'll
are,
join
if you are in a place where you can lie down on a bed or a comfortable surface, you can go ahead and do that. If you're home in a chair, do not please do this if you are driving. Please pull over into a nice, comfortable place. But wherever you are, get yourself as comfortable as you can. You don't have to sit in a particular way. And I'm just going to ask you to just take a few breaths, however you are, wherever you are. Just breathe normally for a moment. And I'm going to ask you to take your two hands and place them on your belly, hence the term belly breathing. And the object will be that you will be taking deep breaths in through your nose, and then exhaling that same breath through your mouth. Kind of like the first half of that breath is if you're taking in a nice scent of coffee or tea. And the second half of that breath, the exhale, will be like blowing out candles on a birthday cake. So you're going to take a deep breath in, and your belly will inflate a bit. And then on the exhale, your belly will deflate. Inhale. Exhale. Inhale. Exhale. When you exhale, really push that air out. Again, think of a birthday cake. All the air out of your lungs. And if you'd like to give yourself a way to measure your breath, you can count to 4 for an in-breath, and then count to 4 on an out-breath. So we'll do an in-breath and an out-breath using the counting. In, 1, 2, 3, 4. Out, 1, 2, 3, 4. In, 1, 2, 3, 4. Fill that belly. Out, 1, 2, 3, 4. Going to give you a half a minute to breathe on your own. Feel your belly rising, and feel it contracting. While you're breathing, sooner or later you will probably notice that you get distracted. Something pulls you away. Maybe something you have to do this afternoon, get to the bank before it closes, maybe work on a project. Something will pull you away. An argument you had. Whenever that happens, you're just going to recognize that you left your breathing, and you're going to come back to where you left off. You're going to come back to your breathing. So I'll give you another minute. Where you get distracted, just note it and come back to your breathing. When we're teaching this, no matter how many times you get distracted, which may be many, you just come back. When you're ready, you can open your eyes again. If they were closed, you can come back into the room. And that's an abbreviated version of something we might take in a class, maybe 10 or 15 minutes to do. But you can see, even after doing it for a short time, that if you really can keep your attention on the sensation of your breathing, your brain has something to do.
Mm-hmm.
It'll still try to hijack you and pull you away, but you keep coming back. You train it like a puppy.
Yeah.
And that's belly breathing.
I like that a lot. It was cool I had learned about myself. I definitely like the guided kind of mindfulness practices. And I like that you validate and normalize that like our mind is going to run away because we're human. And like, I think people get so down on themselves. Like I hear all the time, like,
Yeah.
I can't think about nothing. And I'm like, who can? So like, I love that you normalize that and like almost made it a part of the practice.
Yes.
It
My
is.
mind left 5 minutes ago. I don't know where I am anymore.
But it's so true. And, sometimes just telling people to listen for your
Right.
breath. Like, can
That's
you hear
usually,
yourself breathing?
yeah.
Because I get distracted so easily. And, as you're saying, like, we're thinking about the things we have to do, or this is going to close and I don't have time for that. That's the main thing. I don't have time for it. We do.
Actually, I think I missed the bank closing today while we were doing it.
Yeah.
That's actually something I
He's like bringing
today.
it up. He's like, and we're thinking about the bank closing. He's like, all right, guys, we have to wrap this up.
Maybe we reminded a few people about going to the bank.
Yeah,
today.
everyone's like, yeah, now I have anxiety about something I forgot about. No, but that was.
And when people learn this, by the way, they will come back usually and say, I didn't do it right. I didn't do it right.
Mhm.
My mind just kept wandering. I couldn't. You are doing it right. That is what your brain does.
That's
So
probably the biggest, conversation that we have in over and over again in classes, right? Is that people say, as Tony said, I didn't do it right, or I'm not good at this. I can't do this. And the reason they think that is because they notice their mind wandering.
Mhm.
But then, what we practice is that is the practice. It's
right.
beginning
Training it to
again
refocus.
all the time. That's how we train our brains. So it's actually a great opportunity when your mind wanders to practice.
Yes.
Yeah. Awesome. That was awesome. I'm going to do some later. All right. So when we come back, you're going to tell us all about Koru and everything you guys offer, because I'm sure our listeners and us want to learn more. And yeah. All right. So you mentioned a little bit about the different courses that you guys conduct. Can you tell us more about these courses, what they entail, what you guys cover?
Sure. Well, right now we teach Koru Basic, which is the introductory 4-week class. In that in those 4 weeks, we teach about a total of 9 or 10 skills and practices. So we teach both some stress management skills, like the one Tony just did, the belly breathing. We teach something called dynamic breathing, guided imagery, which is really useful for dealing with stress. And then we do also a variety of meditation practices. We do a labeling practice, a loving kindness practice, the body scan, an eating meditation, a walking meditation. So there is a variety so that people can also, realize that they have a choice. It's not just a sitting practice. And I think that's really a helpful part of the course, is that, if one thing doesn't feel right, then we encourage people to stay open-minded about it, because that might change by the next week, but also there is a variety and there are different choices. And then we also offer throughout the year a Koru alumni hour, several times a year, for any of our students who we've had over the years. And it's just a time to come together, kind of refresh, and help to strengthen the practice and maintain it, and just kind of connect again. So we really look forward to those. We get to see what's happening with people, and it's good for us too, because we're students too. We're always trying to refresh our own practices. So
I think my mind wandered while you were talking.
oh no. Well, thanks for coming back.
I'm dead. No, but that's so how can people sign up or learn more about your courses?
Well, we have a website, Koru Mindfulness LI.com, and on there is actually an in-depth description of Koru mindfulness, what the class curriculum is, and then we have a schedule of our upcoming classes on the website.
Great. Okay, so then our listeners, everyone go ahead to Koru Mindfulness LI.com to learn more.
Thank you guys so much. This was so great. And, I hope everyone was able to learn as much as we were and have this important conversation. So we're going to get in. You're welcome. We're going to get into some rapid fire questions to close us off.
Yes. So I was thinking, I'm like, what is millennial, what is the millennial vibe? And I'm like, Blockbuster, So like when Blockbuster was around, did you guys prefer going and having that experience of picking out a movie or seeing a movie in the theater?
Well, I can say very easily the answer for me is going to the theater. And that is because I find it really difficult to be mindfully watching a movie at home. There are so many distractions, and I never seem to have the same experience at home. It's just a lot more difficult.
So that's so true.
Of course, in the pandemic, I had to hone my skill a little bit and get better. And now I think I enjoy movies at home a little bit more.
Yeah.
Me too. What about you, Tony?
That's funny, Blockbuster. Remember when you used to go and, you really wanted to see this recent release, and there's like 12 copies and they're all out.
Yes.
Yeah. I was saying that to Liana.
I would answer that question. It depends. If it's a Marvel release, if it's a Lord of the Rings release, I got to be in the theater.
The whole experience.
But if it's something recent, it came out 3 months ago, I just didn't see it. Yeah, I would do Blockbuster all the time.
You might just have to rewind it. Remember that, where like the person before you didn't rewind it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
And oh yeah, I mean they would tell you to do it, but no one did. So you just
With like
sit
a
there.
VHS, or you're
Yes.
talking about a DVD?
Oh,
Okay.
I'm talking about VHS.
Yeah, she's going back. She's
Yeah,
going
wow.
back.
Really back there.
Well,
Blockbuster sounds like really a thing of the past, right?
yeah.
It really reminds us how quickly.
Oh yeah. I remember when
technology-
they were shutting down and everyone was like, what are we going to do? And it was like, we don't need it. Then there
Yeah,
was
we
Redbox.
adapted pretty quickly now.
Yeah, very quick. But I was saying to Liana, when we were talking about Blockbuster, was I thought I was like so cool that I could go in and switch, like they used to have like the poster board or like the fake DVD in front of the actual one that you would take, and I used to like just switch them behind and like run away, and I was like, huh. Like why? And that was just like, it was just an experience in itself to go to Blockbuster, which it is sad that no one can experience that. Not that I was saying that was a good thing to do, that was mean, but
As a matter of fact, if you want to check me out on this, if you wanted to buy a VHS player now, they are extremely hard to even find.
I'm sure.
Wow.
And even, you know, there's a couple on eBay, but you're going to pay for them.
Yeah.
So hold on to those if you have them, because they'll be worth a lot of money to some collector.
Definitely.
We have the rewinder, the VHS, like you just put it in like a little machine and just the whole thing. I'm like, why do we still have this? But
Save it.
Yeah, might be worth something.
It will.
So overall, you know, I'm just so grateful that you guys were able to come on here and share everything with us and, you know, provide us this information. So I hope our listeners have learned and attained some skills here and information that maybe they haven't been aware of entirely, and are able to go check out that website and hopefully sign up for some classes or just gather some more information. So thank you guys so much.
Thank you. It was a lot of fun.
Thanks for the great work you're doing.
Thank you guys for listening to another episode of On Thursdays We Thrive. We love learning and growing with you each Thursday.
If you enjoy listening to us, please remember to rate, review, and subscribe to our podcast. To connect with us on Instagram, you can follow @On Thursdays We Thrive.
On Thursdays We Thrive is a partnership between Liana Ross, Sam Triani, and Gooding Wellness, LCSW PC. If you are in New York and would like to speak with a therapist directly or to one of us,
head on down to LongIslandTeletherapy.com or GoodingWellness.com. Keep thriving.